Welcome once again to Breakfast Central. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu on Monday made sweeping changes to the defense forces, forcing out security chiefs and the head of police less than a month after taking office. Tinubu, who is barely 1 month in office as president, named new commanders of the defense forces, Army, Navy, and Air Force with immediate effect.
The Nigerian president has made security one of his key priorities and promised reforms to the sector, including the recruitment of more soldiers and police officers, while paying and equipping them better. It is not unusual for a new Nigerian president to send security chiefs into early retirement upon taking office, as Tinubu did on Monday. Meanwhile, Nigeria's military is stretched, they say, with long-running fighting against rebel groups, as well as banditry and kidnappings for ransom that have spread insecurity to most parts of the country. And expectations are high as the service chiefs assume office.
We're now joined by security expert Kabir Adamu. Good morning, Mr. Adamu. Thanks for your time. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Great to see you. Of course, there's always mixed reactions, with the new service chiefs and the new IG of police, when they were named on Monday. Some people said, and described them as, battle-tested and battle-ready, pretty much the same way the rest were described. But I want to get your reactions. Do you have any feelings, as these new, people have been named?
Yes, and I think it's very important to kind of lay a foundation from where we're coming from so that we get a good picture of the task ahead of this new security leadership. By 2015, when President Buhari assumed the presidency, the major challenge then was one of terrorism. And then what he tried to do was, if you recall, in his inaugural speech, he directed the military leadership to relocate to the northeast, which was symbolic in the sense that he now told the nation that as far as he's concerned, it's the responsibility of the leadership of the military hierarchy to address that challenge of terrorism. Now, we take a step back and ask ourselves, is the military the only agencies or departments in government that are involved in security? And the answer is no. There are about 29 of them that are involved in security. The military is only 4 of these 29. Now, others would include the immigration, the customs, the police, and several others. In your introduction, you mentioned the several security challenges that are affecting Nigeria. All of them, starting from terrorism to banditry to farmer-herder violence to the several other crimes, both violent and opportunistic, that we have in the country, are mainly internal security challenges. Except for few instances, we've not recorded external aggression, and the few instances are in places like Taraba, and then maybe parts of Cross River State, where incursion from insurgents in Cameroon have been recorded into Nigeria. So point I'm trying to make is, it appears to me that our challenge is one of internal security, and therefore this new leadership, the symbolic gesture by President Bola Tinubu of naming a non-military person as the coordinator of national security, which constitutionally is the highest ranked office. It's extremely symbolic, and it tells us of his desire to address these internal security challenges and not necessarily using military force. Now, with regards to what is expected and in terms of the task ahead of these recently named persons, both in terms of their capability, I just refer to the appointment of the person who is occupying the office of the National Security Advisor, and that is Nuhu Ribadu. He comes from a policing background, and I think he's got legal competencies as well. So it is expected that, first off, he understands the mandate of that office. It is expected that this background that I've laid to the point that our challenges are actually internal security challenges, and that the aspiration of the Bola Tinubu administration as encapsulated in its renewed hope agenda. Now, there were 7 points that were listed in that renewed hope agenda. And one of them, which is instructive to our conversation, is that they intend to win the hearts and minds of Nigerians. Now, if our challenges are internal and this administration wants to win the hearts and minds of Nigerians, then the task before this new national security advisor is how does he galvanize the support of Nigerians to manage, especially information. The level of distrust that is currently exists between Nigerians and security agencies is so high that we don't necessarily share information with the security agencies, and without that support from the citizenry, gathering of intelligence will become extremely difficult. So that for me would be number one. How does he enhance our intelligence capabilities? And earlier on, I spoke about 29 ministries, departments, and agencies. So his task is to coordinate these 29. Each of them has an intelligence gathering capability. If I pick one, the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps, that is represented in virtually all the 774 local government, and that has an intelligence component. At the moment, that intelligence component is virtually ineffective. So one of his tasks would be to see how he can make that intelligence component effective. Now he's inheriting an intelligence fusion center. You recall that the new president actually visited the new office of the National Security Advisor, and we were shown on TV how that intelligence fusion center looks like. So the idea is that all of these 24 MDAs will be feeding intelligence into that center, and then there will be a fusion of that intelligence. So what it means is that early warning systems will become effective once there is an indicator of any challenge, security challenge, in all the 774 local governments. That fusion center should be able to capture it, and then the essence of security is to respond to address that indicator before it becomes an issue that affects the lives and property of Nigerians. So that is like for the Office of the National Security Advisor.
Right. Okay. There's so many things that you've highlighted, so many points. One would be that a number of the threats that Nigeria is facing in the area of security is more internal than external, with certain exceptions which you mentioned. This morning, the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper, the highlight was 201 killed in Plateau in 5 months. And then the governor said that there were external forces behind the killings, even though some NGOs blame herders and farmers' rivalry. Now, this is just one number here. According to another data I saw, between May 2015 and May 2023, we've had over 55,000 Nigerians killed as a result of insecurity. Now, unfortunately, what we're seeing is Nigerians don't feel like security has been prioritized, and that it's been pushed to the back burner in a sense. It feels like there's some sense of, numbness, like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, that there is a desensitization to all these killings. From your standpoint, what would the current administration need to do, or would you say that you are convinced that this is something that the current administration would prioritize in a way that would see a drastic reduction in the number of these killings, or probably an end to all of this? And how do we then prioritize these conversations and make it come to the front burner? Some days ago, Uganda had the same experience, and it's something that everyone is talking about, how the ADF attacked a boarding school and killed about 40 children. And it made the front pages of the newspapers. Everyone's been talking about it, but it seems that here we're not paying as much attention to it, because it now seems everyone is getting used to these numbers being thrown around.
So the beauty of democracy is that it allows us to play an advocacy role. If you attempt that in a military, dictatorship, you are likely to be arrested. But in a democracy, you are able to advocate for change, and that advocacy, to an extent, allows pressure on the government. And so, to answer your question, part of the challenge that we have in Nigeria, let me take us back a little bit to the Buhari administration. He invested massively in security. When in 2015, the budgetary provision for security was around 900 billion naira. By the time he left this year, the budgetary provision for security is about 2.3 trillion. So he's increased the provision for security by almost 300%. But like I mentioned at the beginning, I run a consultancy, and we have a database where we monitor incidents and fatalities. And I can tell you that within that period, at least 78,000 Nigerians have been killed. So there is no way that you would relate this investment in security with this high number of fatalities and say it was a success. It's understandable that Nigerians feel that security is not given the kind of attention that they deserve, which is actually a contradiction, because as part of his 3-point agenda, former President Buhari included security. If you look at the National Assembly, both the 8th and 9th Assembly and the ones before them had security as part of their legislative agenda. So what is lacking is accountability measures. In other words, how do we monitor the performances of these 29 MDAs within security to know which one is doing well and which one is not doing well? And then, of course, accountability comes with either reward or penalty. So these two things are absolutely missing. And for me, this would be my recommendation to the new administration.
Yep.
Ensure
Mr. Adama, I wanted to ask you, but doesn't it seem like we're repeating the same mistakes, which is, now you've mentioned that there's 29 of these branches, security agencies. We still do not seem, or the current administration doesn't still seem to recognize these 29. We're still doing pretty much the same thing, which is change, the people in charge, and, pretty much nothing else really is done to focus on these 29 different branches of security that we have in the country. We have really just done the same thing that previous administration did, which was when, Nigerians are tired of complaining of Tukur Buratai and the rest of service chiefs, the Buhari administration changed them, but nothing else was changed and nothing, felt different. So is the change in personnel really the answer? And is the current administration still making the same mistake?
Well, first off, it's a little bit early to kind of reach that conclusion, whether they are making the same mistake. But I can tell you that the narrative around what the current administration is doing suggests that we're making the same mistake. We are laying emphasis on the service chiefs and not necessarily on the security leadership. The highest ranked person within the security sector structure is the Office of the National Security Advisor. And his mandate is very clear in the Constitution. His mandate is in fact, he is referred to as the security coordinator. So, I'm hoping he's listening to this. If I were in his shoes, I would sit down and look at all of these 29 MDAs. I took my time and actually did a structure and drew these 29 and tried to put them under their different leader coordinators. So as an example, the Ministry of Interior, you have the custodial center there, you have the fire service, you have the civil, or what we call the civil defense, Nigeria security and the civil defense. And then you have the Nigeria Immigration Service. So that's an example. And then of course you go to Ministry of Police Affairs, Ministry of Defense, to an extent Ministry of Transportation. NIMASA is under Ministry of Transportation. And then you have NDLEA, you have EFCC, ICPC under the presidency. So if I were in his shoes, that's the global picture I would look at. And then get legal experts to dig up their mandates, because all of them have mandates. They are backed by law, and that law specifies exactly their functions. Now the challenge, I don't want to complicate the conversation, but the challenge is that there are duplication of functions even among them. So part of what he would have to do is to advise the presidency, the president in particular, where there are duplication of functions. We may need to have either merger or to create true synergy between the executive arm and the legislative arm of government, a revision of the mandate so that duplication is reduced. Right. The other challenge that he would likely see when he looks at that global picture is the difficulty for coordination. I'll quickly mention that the police is divided into at least 4 or 5 of these ministries that I've mentioned. So it will be very difficult for the Inspector General of Police to coordinate the functions of all these agencies, and there must be some kind of changes to the
All right.
structure to
Now,
allow him to carry out policing functions.
yeah, let's break it down into what we currently have mentioned. Olive mentioned earlier, 201 persons killed in Plateau State in the last 5 months, which was on the news this morning. And of course, we've continued to report these killings in the Middle Belt region in Nigeria. It seems like they have surged in the last couple of weeks. So let's talk about if that should be the utmost focus of the Tinubu administration. Now you've named new service chiefs. Are you meant to be giving marching orders to the Inspector General of Police? He was making bold statements yesterday, but of course people are still being killed in Plateau States. In the news this morning, 20 people were killed. And so what would you think, or what would you say should be the response of the IG of Police, aside making bold press statements? What should be the response, to protecting lives and property of people in Plateau State and in the whole of the Middle Belt region? And should we shame these people when they fail to perform at this point?
No, definitely. So let me start with the first part of your question. What should be his task? He is a strategic leader. He's meant to provide strategic direction and then to manage the implementation of the policing and policy by the administration. And the policy is very clear. I referred earlier on to the Renewed Hope agenda, which was released by the Tinubu, campaign group during the campaigns. And in that document, there were 7 points. The ones that affect the police that I think is important to us. I mentioned one: winning the hearts and minds of the people, and then in using technology to address security challenges. And then that document also spoke about the welfare of the police. But more importantly, the introductory part of that document talked about reviewing what the Buhari administration has done, and then improving on areas where a good effort has been done and then gaps remain. So speaking specifically about that, in 2021, the Buhari administration instituted a committee that just before he handed over power to President Tinubu, launched a police reform document. And that reform document it introduced a roadmap for the reform of the police. And I'll take us back to the NSAS protest. You recall that it was the desire of every Nigerian, and I make bold to say that, to have a new police system that would be reflective of our desires as a civil society. And so that roadmap promises to change the police into one that you and I would see and be happy about. There are 5 points there listed in that agenda. So I would hope that the IG will pick that roadmap and then see where his predecessor has stopped in terms of the implementation, and then of course go ahead and implement the remaining components. And I'll quickly tell you, it's about technology, it's about enhancing intelligence collection, intelligence dissemination, it's about the use of modern equipment in terms of policing. In speaking about that, there is a project that was started, and that I'll urge him to complete that project. So a crime database is being, constructed, as it were, within the police headquarters. And that crime database has the support of our international partners, including Interpol. And if once they complete that project, we would be admitted into the global body of policing that uses technology for addressing policing issues. So I think it's absolutely important that he looks at that project, completes it, and then gives us that aspiration. In summary, he has a template that if he embraces and implements, I think would make his work much more easier. He doesn't need to reinvent the wheel.
All right. As we wrap up the conversation, I'd also like us to talk a little bit about community policing. The IGP has vowed to ensure that this is something that he would prioritize in this time. We've seen that in the past few years there have been collaborations between states and socio-political groups, like to have their own community police. We've had the likes of Amotekun, Ebubeagu, and all that. How effective do you think that this is something that how effective do you think that these bodies will be in this new administration, and how important is it for us to have conversations and implementation of maybe state policing and community policing in this administration?
Okay, so let me make a conceptual clarification so that at least we're speaking the same language. Community policing is a philosophy as distinct from state-level security policing. So when we refer to community policing, we're referring to a philosophy in policing that allows the community to be engaged in policing as against creating community level policing structures. I hope that
Yes,
that difference.
yes.
Like, so already there is an agenda for the creation of community policing philosophy, and under that there are two structures that are in the pipeline, and in fact, a lot has been done in that regard, and that is the community policing committees in each of the 774 local government. Those committees, those community policing committees, will have membership of the different segments of society. So market women association, youths, traders, name them, will be part of that community. And the essence of that is, I mean, if something is affecting you as a representative of that committee, you would table it there. And of course, you are having that meeting within a police division. And so that police division will be able to address your concern immediately. So you see how effective, once we make this philosophy functional, policing will be. The second element of the community policing philosophy, as far as Nigeria, now that was begun. The constabularies have been recruited, quote and unquote, but sadly, the Nigerian factor played a role. Politicians thought there would be payment for that role. So most of them brought in their cronies into the system, as it were, and then they found out that there was no budget. It wasn't meant to be a paid role, and so we're at the logjam now, where they are looking for money, as it were, to fund that initiative. So it is the responsibility of the new IG to look at these challenges, work together with the Minister of Police Affairs when he's appointed, as well as the Police Service Commission, to address these two challenges. Each of the structures have been created. Most of the committees are already there. It's just to make them effective. Now, to the second part of your question, which is the creation of community level structures, either at the state level or at the community level. The reality in Nigeria today is that there is no state that you go to or no community that you go to that does not have one or the other form of structure. Sadly, they are not recognized by the Constitution. So until we do a constitutional review that allows that, what I would recommend the new IG to do is to make sure that he works with this and train them, because most of them are backed by state laws. In the case of Amotekun, as an example, at least 4 of the south-west states have backed the creation of their Amotekun in their states with legislation. So to an extent, they have legal backing. If you go to Kano, Hisba has the same thing, likewise. So I would urge him, engage with these structures, but for intelligence gathering, so that they understand where their power starts and where their powers end. Part of the challenges that we're seeing at the moment, if you use Zamfara as an example, where they created a vigilante, and the vigilante became a monster that has created, the kind of situation we have in Zamfara at the moment, is that they have assumed powers that they don't have. They arrest, they detain, and they prosecute. In some instances, kill extrajudicially. So this is what the police needs to do: engage with them, teach them intelligence gathering capabilities, lecture them on the essence of being law-abiding. They can support in gathering intelligence. In some instances, like every Nigerian has the power of arrest, they can arrest, but they don't have the power to prosecute.
Yeah. Breaks my heart that we've had similar conversations. You and I have spoken about these things, since at least 2020. And we've laid out these solutions, laid out these policies and how things should be done. But it didn't seem like anybody was listening to us at the time. I hope they're listening today. Kabir Adamu, thank you very much for joining us. And we will speak with you again pretty soon. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.